Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be providing an update to the bull market support band. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. Now, if you've been watching the last, I want to say 4 videos that I've posted, you may have noticed that they don't really seem to line up with what the markets are currently doing. And that's because all of those videos were recorded a week ago, but I still thought they were relevant to record. I mean, I was out of town for the last week and I wanted to release something while I was out of town. So for instance, yesterday I posted a video and it showed Bitcoin was at 66K, and I knew I was going to get a lot of comments about it, but I thought to myself, and I've said this before, my videos are not based on what happens tomorrow or what happened yesterday. If I make a video on Bitcoin, it shouldn't matter if it's at 66K or 64K. People shouldn't get upset because it's $2,000 lower or higher from where I made the video at. And that's something I often see. Like sometimes I put out a video and the next day the price does something completely different than what I was thinking was more the long-term view. Or the next day it'll do what I was describing and people will say, oh, like you caught it, or this aged poorly. But in both of those scenarios, you should know that, again, my views are not a reflection as to what I think is going to happen tomorrow, So if it does happen tomorrow, it's just, it's just random. It's not, it's very difficult. So again, I get the frustration that the videos have been lagging for about a week or so. This video is at least, coming in with, at the current prices at around $63,000. Of course, by the time you watch the video, the price could be different, but it should be, it's more reflective of what's going on. So that was the reason I was out of town, and I just pre-recorded videos to release them throughout the week. Now, with that said, there have been quite a lot of updates to be had over the last week, because we've actually seen Bitcoin close below its 20-week moving average for the first time since October of 2023. Now, at this point, while it is below the 20-week moving average, it is still above the 21-week EMA. And remember, the bull market support band consists of both the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA. And the 20-week SMA is currently at 64,824. And we just, last week, the weekly close of the 20-week SMA was at $64,086, and the close was at $63,154. Okay, and now the price is at just over $63,000, or still below the 20-week SMA. But the 21-week EMA last week was only $61,290. This week it's $61,451. So we are in fact still above the 21-week EMA. In fact, the current 21-week EMA is actually right around the price that Bitcoin held support at weekly closes back in early May. Now, I said going into this summer, right, that we should see, theoretically, we should see a summer lull. But in that, I said that even if we get it, you're likely going to get a pump sometime in May to make people think it's not going to happen, right? Because that's what often happens. It happened in 2021, right? We had this. It happened in I believe it happened in 2022, but to a lesser extent, right? I mean, it rallied from 25K up to 32K. It might not sound like a lot, especially when you're looking at today's prices, but at least from that low in May, it was still about a 27% move to the upside. And just right here, right, from this low in late April, early May, that was also about a 27% move to the upside. Over here in 2021, it was coincidentally about a 27% move to the upside. And even last year, right, the year that everyone remembers the most, the most vividly, because it was most recent, Bitcoin had also, coincidentally, I don't know what it is, maybe someone do some data mining on this 27% stuff, but about a 27% move to the upside in June, And so this is a common occurrence that we see Bitcoin do, is that you get to the end of April, and I think we even talked about this, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I have this vivid memory of talking about this back in like late April of this idea that regardless of whether, regardless of the eventual outcome, what was the most likely outcome was to, by late April, to take out this low here that we established in March, right? To sweep below that low in late April, early May, and then to get a bounce back up before figuring out what we're actually going to do, right? That was what we talked about. To take out the low, to get a bounce back up, and then to basically consolidate. We, expressed that many, many times. And the reason I said this, actually, one of the reasons was because a lot of times people say, sell in May and go away, right? Because they say it because price often bleeds. A lot of times price will often take a big hit in late April. And so by the time May rolls around, everyone is feeling pretty bad about the price. And so they say sell in May, go away. And then you end up getting this rally in May that then draws people back in, potentially before the actual summer lull takes over. And again, this is something that we've seen happen many, many times in Bitcoin's price history, and it doesn't have to happen, right? I mean, there's no guarantee that it continues to play out like that. And even last year, when Bitcoin got a rally around the same time, it actually put in a new yearly high. Now, this time, it has not yet seen a new yearly high. And I do want to talk about a few things because there actually have been a lot of things that have happened just over the last week. So, first of all, we have in fact had a weekly close below the 20-week moving average. Now, it also, of course, closed below the 8-week SMA. And this is something that we also said to keep an eye on, that we would likely, after holding support at the 20-week SMA, the first time you go to it, you normally wick off of it. You go above the 8-week moving average, and then you go back below the 8-week moving average later on in the summer. Same thing happened last year. Same thing happened also in 2019. Okay? This is a very common thing that happens with Bitcoin, and it should not really be that much of a surprise. Now, the 8-week SMA is at 65,800 or so we're well below that. Now, I know what everyone wants me to talk about, and that's alt Bitcoin pairs. And the reason and if you didn't want me to talk about that, then I don't know, maybe this is the right channel for you. But if you look at alt Bitcoin pairs, they had a weekly close below support. Okay? To me, this is a big deal. Now, that doesn't mean that it has to immediately break down. It doesn't mean it won't, right? I mean, in fact, in 2019, it did immediately break down. This is one of those things where, like, I expressed my opinion about alt Bitcoin pairs for years and years and years. This week was the lowest weekly close by alt Bitcoin pairs we've had for the entire cycle, right? Lowest weekly close. So, of course, I'm going to come out and say, look, guys, it's the lowest weekly close. And if it rallies next week, then the dunking, can begin again. But the reality is right, altcoins keep fading back to Bitcoin in the same way they did in 2019. And I know a lot of people hate that comparison. They want me to compare it to 2020. But guys, it's the same damn thing, right? I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it just is. And I don't control what it is. It just is what it is. And all I keep seeing is that you're seeing alt Bitcoin pairs break down while you have, interest rates relatively elevated. And we saw alt Bitcoin pairs break down in June of 2019, and the Fed cut shortly thereafter. And it looks like they're breaking down again. Now, that doesn't mean they can't go back up at all. I'm not saying they can't go back up, and get bounces back to higher levels. I mean, you can see over here, it started off going all the way up to like 0.51, 0.52, went down, then went back up to 0.48, went down, and then went back up to 0.44. I mean, who knows if it's going to get another move up, or if this is just it and it finally capitulates to the range lows that we've been talking about for the entire Bitcoin dominance journey that we've been on. And so for me, I look at a chart like this, and rather than try to time every single short-term move by alt Bitcoin pairs, I just recognize that the general trend is down, just like it was over here as monetary policy became tighter and tighter. And this is the reality. I mean, you can cherry pick fewer and fewer alts if you want, but the dominance of Bitcoin continues to go up. And if you don't believe me, one way to look at this is to look at Bitcoin divided by total minus ETH. So, I mean, again, the Bitcoin dominance right now is still at 55%. If you exclude ETH from the Bitcoin dominance calculation, Bitcoin dominance just put on a new cycle high, right? It just put on a new cycle high. Now, you might say it's cope to even compare it like that, and I might agree with you, But I also would also point out that the same thing actually happened in 2019 with ETH Bitcoin, where you saw alt Bitcoin pairs break down in June, and then ETH Bitcoin broke down in July. And again, this is the playbook that we saw happen in 2019, right? If you look at ETH Bitcoin, it also broke down, but it took it a little longer to break down, right? It didn't break down until about mid-July, whereas alt Bitcoin pairs broke support in June, right? I mean, as you can see, right, if you zoom in on alt Bitcoin pairs, if we look at this wick right here, this weekly close occurred the week of June 24th, where we closed below prior support. ETH Bitcoin didn't break down for a couple more weeks. So yes, it might be cope to say that, well, if you calculate dominance excluding ETH, it's putting in new cycle highs. I would also just humbly point out that, look, last cycle alt Bitcoin pairs broke down first in June, and then ETH Bitcoin ended up breaking down the following month. So that is a pretty big development in the cryptoverse. And you can also see that the bull market support band and in fact the 8-week SMA continue to guide the alt Bitcoin pairs down. Right? You can see that the 8-week SMA is guiding them down. The bull market support band is guiding them down. So you have a lot of these things aligning that we've been talking about for years. I think a lot of people are just frustrated that it's taking this long to play out, but I don't really think an unbiased person could look at this chart and pretend like it's not playing out, right? Again, for anyone who has been bullish on alt Bitcoin pairs over the last 2.5 years, they've been wrong, because alt Bitcoin pairs just put in a new low this last week, right? They just put in a new low. Now, of course, you're going to have the altcoin dip buyers on their Bitcoin pairs, right? Say that, well, this is when they're going to bounce. And look, guys, I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I know that last cycle they didn't really bounce until they went all the way down to 0.3. And that's not entirely true. If you look at the daily time frame, they actually did get a bigger bounce. Like if you look at when they broke support, they went all the way down to 0.35. They wicked all the way back up to 0.42. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's not impossible for something like that to happen. Right? It's certainly not impossible, but any types of moves back up to the upside for alt Bitcoin pairs, I would expect to be relatively short-lived. I do think eventually they are going to go down to 0.25, especially now that support is theoretically breaking. So we'll see what the next couple of weeks hold. For alt Bitcoin pairs. Honestly, I'm not going to keep a super close eye on it. Well, that's not true. I probably will. But I'm not going to make, constant references to it. You guys know my opinion on it. And I mean, if it rallies up to 0.4 or drops to 0.36, my view doesn't change, right? I think they're going to bleed back down to the range lows. I think that, if you look at alt Bitcoin pairs, you're watching them break support. And remember, we saw a lot of individual altcoins break support. And once they break support on their Bitcoin pairs, they then struggle on their USD pairs. And you're seeing the same thing happen again, right? Over here, when alt Bitcoin pairs broke down, alt USD pairs followed. And frankly, if you look at total 3, it just closed below the bull market support band. So again, this is one of those things where a lot of people were looking at alt Bitcoin pairs or alt USD pairs as potentially right here, right? But right here never had weekly closes below the bull market support band, whereas over here did. And what this has in common with this here is that that's when alt Bitcoin pairs broke down in the summer of 2019. Over here, alt Bitcoin pairs were actually already in macro uptrends, which is why I don't think that this is similar to this. I think it's actually more similar to this over here. Now, the USD valuation of Bitcoin obviously is a lot more difficult to predict than alt Bitcoin pairs. The reason for that is because my view on alt Bitcoin pairs is that they go down no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. I don't care if Bitcoin goes up, down, sideways, whatever. Guess what? Most alts are going to bleed. It doesn't really matter what Bitcoin does. It's because liquidity is flowing from high-risk assets to low-risk assets. Be that as it may, I would be remiss if I didn't at least bring up the fact that so far we have seen a series of lower highs that sort of bounce off the bull market support band, not that dissimilar from what we saw in 2019. So I think that should be on your radar. And if it is, I put out a video a couple of weeks ago saying that, look, it looks like we're getting rejected from the range high. This is when everyone was bull posting about Bitcoin and saying, no way, it's going to go back to the low 60s here. Well, here we are. We're back at the bull market support band, just like 2019. Um, and now you have the decision to make, right? Because I mean, this is one of those things where, when Bitcoin was at 71K and everyone was bull posting, and they're saying, later guys, now you have a decision, right? Now Bitcoin's back at 60, 62K, 63K. If you feel like you missed out, I mean, here you go, right? I would just say, look, DCA strategy over the long haul based on risk levels you're comfortable with is probably going to be the best strategy. And the thing to be on the lookout for potential downside is if we lose the bull market support band, kind of like USD pairs just lost. And the thing is even if we do lose it, it doesn't necessarily have to be immediate. We could go back down to 60 and bounce again. If you look closely at what happened in 2019, in fact, we did get another bounce, right? We went up, we came down. We went up again, we came down again, and then we got one final bounce, and then we came back over here, and then we dropped below the 20-week moving average. So again, if that is going to play out, it could take some time, right? And the reason I say that is because remember, back over here in 2019, it was during this period that alt Bitcoin pairs were capitulating. And by the time that total 3 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin reached the range low of 0.25, it was in September of 2019. And that was when Bitcoin finally fell below the 20-week moving average, right? So there's also this reality of, guess what? Alt Bitcoin pairs, while they have been stuck in tropical and struggle streak for a while, they're still not at the range lows, suggesting that Bitcoin still has some liquidity to take from the altcoin market, and the fact that altcoins could still easily drop from the current levels over the next several months another 33%. Now that might sound like a lot, but just a few months ago I was saying they're going to drop, over 50%, and now they've already dropped, 25 of that 50%. So to me, it does seem like it's playing out. We also saw the blue chip dominance, Bitcoin plus ETH dominance, get a weekly close above 73%. This was the same level that provided tough resistance last cycle. We have finally broken through it. We also saw Bitcoin dominance plus USDT dominance. It has not yet broken through 61%, but it is getting relatively close. And you can see that last cycle we set a high, we came back again, and then it was on the next attempt we finally broke through. Set a high, came back again, set a slightly higher high, just like we did back over here, and then we finally broke through. I think we're building up to that right now. I think we're going to break through, and I think it's going to go back up over here. And if you look at USDT dominance, you will see a very similar pattern, right, that we've been talking about forever. And in fact, USDT dominance is now back above the bull market support band. You also saw others Bitcoin wick down again. This is one of those things where, you look at others Bitcoin, and I think to myself, everyone who's been bull posting about lower market cap alts against Bitcoin, the reality is that they've been in a downtrend since January 2024. The real reality is they've been in a downtrend since January 2022. And the sobering reality that I think a lot of people should accept is that last cycle, alt Bitcoin pairs dropped 60%. They then rallied 60% before rate cuts. And then just before rate cuts arrived, they dropped another 60%. This cycle, they dropped 60%. Rallied 60, and maybe they're currently 33% down in maybe a final 60% drop. So again, it's a long process. It's playing out. Bitcoin is taking in that liquidity. It's above the bull market support band, or it's at least above the 21-week EMA. And while it is above the 21-week EMA, a lot of altcoins are not, right? ADA is below it, DOT's below it, Avalanche is below it, Solana is below it, Matic is below it. XRP is below it, Link is below it, BNB slightly above it, but again, most of them are below it, right? Doge below it, Litecoin typically below it, and it is again now. Uni slightly above, right? But again, the whole idea is that the number of altcoins that are outperforming Bitcoin are becoming fewer and fewer and fewer. And one way to visualize that actually is to simply go look at the advanced decline index of the top 100 cryptocurrencies, and you can see, this is an outright capitulation right here, right? There's a good chance that we're going to take out the October low in terms of the advanced decline index of the top 100 cryptocurrencies. Essentially, what you're seeing is the breadth of the market is collapsing while the liquidity goes from the higher risk assets to the blue chips, mainly Bitcoin and ETH. And, this is one of those reasons why you see ETH still holding up better. ETH is still above its bull market support band, just like Bitcoin. In fact, ETH is doing a little bit better than Bitcoin is right now, on the back of the news we had from the spot ETF. But that could easily change, right? It could easily change. So again, I look at this, I look at all these things, and I say, from a practical perspective, I mean, I feel like everything we've talked about over the last several years in a really abstract sense, it's happening, right? It's happening. You're seeing Bitcoin dominance continue to go up. You're seeing all Bitcoin pairs break down. You're seeing, blue chip dominance break up. You're seeing Bitcoin dominance plus USDT dominance break up. You're seeing all USD pairs break down just before potential rate cuts. It all seems like it's playing out, but it's just playing out on a time frame much longer than many viewers, especially of other channels, care to operate on, right? If it doesn't happen tomorrow, then it's wrong, right? If it doesn't happen next week, then it's wrong. But this is a macro view that takes place over many, many years, right? And I said a long time ago, exposure to crypto, in my opinion, should be mostly limited to Bitcoin until looser monetary policy arrives. That does not mean Bitcoin can't take a hit. It does not mean that. It can. It can take a hit. 2019 showed us that when looser monetary policy arrives, or just before it arrives, even the giants can bend the knee, right? I don't know exactly when that's going to occur. I don't know if we're already in this pattern right here. But guys, we talked about this as well. ETH USD did the same exact thing, going into the merge, if you remember, right? If you look at what happened with ETH USD, remember that? Going into the merge, ETH USD put in a high 1 month before the merge. And then it put in a lower high at the merge, right? High was in August 2022 of that rally, lower high at the date of the merge. And then another lower high. You see that? High, lower high after the merge, right? The merge was the lower high, and then a month after that, it was another lower high. Same thing here with Bitcoin. You see this? You get a high a month before the halving, a lower high the month of the halving, and then a lower high the month after the halving. Right? It's the same. I mean, it's a very similar trend, and we talked about this months ago. But what's frustrating is, when you talk about it, and you talk about these rallies that can go back up to the range highs, get rejected, go back down to the bull market support band. It's just a long process. It takes place over many, many months, and the view's not going to change, right? And my view's not going to change tomorrow. If all Bitcoin pairs go down 20%, if they go up 20%, it's not going to change. It's based on a larger macro theory, right, that takes years to play out, right? And I just think we're still in the process where you're watching the systematic devaluation of alt Bitcoin pairs. I think it's just happening a year later in this cycle than it happened in last cycle. There you have it. There's your update to the Bitcoin bull market support band, which is really just another Bitcoin dominance video. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.